I want a divorce, he said, sliding the papers across the breakfast table like a
The latest
business
figures
deal
show a
he'd
significant
already
drop.
closed.
A drop,
I
that's a
signed
shock.
them
I know,
without
it's
crying.
disappointing.
What
Very.
my husband didn't know was that in 12 hours, the most dangerous man in 2 continents would offer me his empire. The coffee tasted like metal. Christina stared at her reflection in the kitchen window, her natural curls pulled into the sleek bun Brian preferred. Outside, morning traffic hummed through their downtown penthouse. 7 years reduced to his lawyer-drafted settlement, presented between toast and his 8 a.m. conference call. You'll keep the condo, obviously, he'd said, checking his Rolex like he'd scheduled 15 minutes for her devastation. I just need to move forward. You understand. She understood perfectly. Forward meant the VP from his consulting firm, the one he thought she hadn't noticed at the Christmas party, the one young enough to fit his new chapter. Christina gripped her coffee mug. When had she become this woman, the one who'd abandoned her CFDA award-winning design career to be arm candy at corporate dinners? Who'd filed down every sharp edge until she was smooth, acceptable, forgettable? Her phone buzzed. Emergency staffing request for the Korean Heritage Foundation Gala. Tonight. Black tie. $500 plus tips. I'll take it, she texted back. She needed to be anywhere but this sterile tomb of a marriage. Across the city, Duyun stood before floor-to-ceiling windows in his private office, Seoul's sister city sprawling 50 stories below. His reflection showed what the world saw: immaculate Tom Ford suit, controlled violence, the man who'd transformed his father's street syndicate into a trans-Pacific empire while keeping its lethal foundation. What it didn't show was the boredom, the suffocating weight of another territory acquired, another politician bought, another victory that meant nothing. The Heritage Foundation Gala, sir, his Lieutenant Minjun said. Your attendance would strengthen the partnership with. I'll attend. Duyun cut him off. He needed distraction from another night of empty power. He didn't know that in 6 hours, he'd collide with a woman whose devastated eyes would mirror his own hollow empire. A woman who'd make him feel something he'd convinced himself he'd buried with his innocence. Everything. Have you ever felt invisible in your own life? Drop a comment below. Christina moved through the gala like a shadow, balancing champagne flutes and Korean fusion canapes among Manhattan's elite. Designer gowns. Political sharks. Old money pretending to celebrate culture while negotiating deals. She'd designed gowns for women like these once. Now she served them drinks. Careful. She turned too quickly and collided with a wall of expensive wool and sandalwood cologne. Champagne sloshed. Strong hands, scarred knuckles, she noticed, caught her tray before disaster struck. I'm so sorry, The apology died. He was devastating. Sharp jaw that could cut glass, dark eyes that didn't just look at her but into her. Presence that made the room's oxygen shift toward him. A neck tattoo, Hangul script, peeked above his collar. Dangerous. Beautiful. Wrong for this polished crowd. But it was the way he looked at her, like she was the only person in the room, that stopped her heart. You created the menu? Duyun asked, still steadying her tray, his voice low and deliberate. Yes. Her voice barely worked. Brilliant. Bold. Unafraid. His eyes held hers, like someone refusing to stay invisible. Christina's breath caught. How did this stranger see what she'd been hiding for 7 years? The flavor profiles, he continued, releasing the tray slowly. They speak of someone who understands transformation. Pain turned into beauty. Who are you? Who are you? Not Brian's wife. Not the help. Just her. Christina. Her name felt foreign on her tongue. Duyun. He pulled a matte black card from his breast pocket, turning it over to write something on the back in precise Korean characters before switching to English. A phone number. Nothing else. When you're ready to stop disappearing, call me. Their fingers brushed as she took it, lightening up her spine. I'm married, she whispered, though the papers in her purse said otherwise now. His smile was slight, knowing, predatory. I noticed the tan line where your ring used to be. The question is, did he ever truly see you? Before she could answer, two men in dark suits materialized. His security. They pulled him toward a cluster of city officials, but those eyes, dark, hungry, possessive, stayed locked on hers until the crowd consumed him. Christina looked at the card, felt it burn against her palm like a promise, like a threat. Everything had just shifted. Brian came home at 11 p.m., humming, smelling of perfume that wasn't hers. He didn't ask about her day. At 3 a.m., unable to sleep in their guest room, Christina pulled out the black card. Her thumb hovered over the number. Then she pressed call. The morning after the gala, Christina woke to silence so complete it felt like drowning. Brian had already left. 6 a.m. spin class, then the office, then wherever men went when they discarded their wives like expired subscriptions. She wandered through their penthouse in yesterday's clothes, seeing it clearly for the first time in years. Everything was beige, taupe, cream. Brian's decorator had called it sophisticated neutrality. Christina called it a mausoleum. Not a single piece of her award-winning textile work on the walls. No color. No life. Just expensive emptiness that photographed well for his LinkedIn. Her phone buzzed. A text from her former college roommate Maya. Girl, I'm so sorry. Just saw Brian's Instagram. Christina's stomach dropped. She opened the app she'd stopped using years ago. Brian said social media was unprofessional for a consultant's wife. There he was. Brian Hall, smiling in front of their Cape Cod beach house. Their anniversary gift to each other 3 years ago. Except he wasn't alone. A woman with Pinterest-perfect beach waves leaned into his chest, her hand displaying Christina's grandmother's engagement ring. The caption, New Beginnings with My Forever, posted 4 hours ago. 63 likes already. Christina's hand shook. He'd moved her into their house, wearing her ring. While Christina was serving champagne to strangers, he was playing house with his replacement. She scrolled back. The photos went back months. The Christmas party where Christina had stayed home with the flu. There she was in the background. The guys' weekend in Miami. She was tagged in a group shot. The late nights at the office. Selfies at wine bars, her face pressed to his shoulder. 7 years. She'd given him 7 years. Abandoned her design studio, her collection, her CFDA connections. All because he'd convinced her that his career needed her support more than hers needed her passion. And he'd been auditioning her replacement the entire last year. Christina walked to their bedroom, opened Brian's nightstand. The drawer was empty except for a single folder. Divorce papers. Multiple drafts. Dated back 6 months. All the language about amicable separation and growing apart already written while she'd been planning their anniversary trip to Paris. She laughed. It came out broken, sharp enough to cut. Her phone buzzed again. Not Maya this time. An unknown number. You called at 3 a.m. then hung up. Are you safe? Duyun. He'd saved her number. Christina looked around the penthouse that had never been hers. At the life she'd performed for a man who'd been writing her exit for half a year. At the ring she'd stopped wearing that was already on someone else's finger. She pulled out the black card, still in her pocket from last night. This time she didn't hesitate. No, she typed back. But I'm ready to be. The black Mercedes arrived in 15 minutes. No Uber logo. No license plate she could memorize. Just tinted windows and a driver who opened the door without speaking. Christina should have been terrified. Instead, she felt awake for the first time in years. The car glided through pre-dawn Manhattan, past neighborhoods that shifted from her sanitized financial district to something grittier, more alive. They stopped in Koreatown, outside a building with no signage. Just a single red door flanked by two men whose suits couldn't hide their violent potential. They nodded at her like they'd been expecting her. The elevator required a keycard. It rose so smoothly she barely felt the motion, just the numbers climbing, 30, 40, 50, until the doors opened directly into a penthouse that made Brian's place look like a college dorm. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city waking up. Minimalist furniture that cost more than cars. But it was the art that stopped her cold. A Yayoi Kusama Infinity Room installation. A Kahind Wiley portrait. A Kim June digital piece she'd only seen in museum catalogs. You came. Do-yoon's voice came from behind her. She turned. He looked different without the tuxedo. Black joggers, a fitted t-shirt that revealed full sleeves of tattoos she'd only glimpsed before. Dragons. Peonies. Hangul script that looked like poetry or warnings. His hair was slightly mussed, like he'd been running his hands through it. More human. Somehow more dangerous. You collect contemporary Korean artists, Christina said, because it was easier than admitting she'd fled her marriage to a stranger's penthouse at dawn. I collect things that refuse to be ignored. He moved to the windows, hands in his pockets. Coffee. Or are we pretending this is a social call? I don't know what this is. Honest. Good. He turned to face her. Your husband posted his mistress on Instagram 4 hours ago. You saw it, broke something expensive in your apartment, then remembered a dangerous man gave you his private number. Am I close? Christina's throat tightened. How did you? I make it my business to know things. He crossed to her slowly, deliberately. Especially about people who interest me. Why would I interest you? Because last night, I watched you serve champagne to people who didn't see you, and you still created art on every plate. Because you have a tan line where you used to wear a ring, but your hand keeps reaching for it like muscle memory. Because when I looked at you, you looked back like you'd forgotten anyone could actually see you. He stopped close enough that she could smell sandalwood and something darker underneath. Smoke. Danger. Truth. I see you, Christina Williams. Fashion designer. CFDA winner. Woman who made herself invisible to make a small man feel big. His voice dropped. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Her phone buzzed. Brian calling. Probably realized she'd seen the post. Do-yoon glanced at the screen. You can answer that. Go back to your beige prison. Be civil through the divorce. He pulled out another card, this one embossed with a gold number. Or you can see what happens when you stop disappearing. Christina let Brian's call go to voicemail. Then she blocked his number. Coffee, she said. I'll take that coffee. Do-yoon's smile was slight, approving. He led her through the penthouse to a terrace she hadn't noticed. A hidden oasis 50 stories above the city. Real grass. Cherry blossom trees in massive planters. A view that made Manhattan look like a kingdom waiting to be conquered. He handed her a cup, proper coffee. Not the bland corporate roast Brian preferred. It tasted like earth and smoke and waking up. Tell me about the CFDA award, Do-yoon said, settling into a chair across from her. You were 23. Youngest winner in the emerging talent category. You researched me. I told you. I know things. He sipped his coffee, watching her over the rim. Your collection was called Invisible Women. Textiles that changed color based on temperature, emotion, environment. The fashion world called you a prodigy. Christina's chest tightened. She hadn't heard anyone speak about her work in years. Brian had called it a cute hobby once she became his wife. That was a different person, she said quietly. Was it? Or did someone convince you to disappear? Duyun leaned forward. What happened after the award? I met Brian at the after-party. Harvard MBA, McKinsey consultant, looked good in a suit. He said I was brilliant. She laughed bitterly. For 6 months, he came to every show, every studio session. Then he proposed. Said he wanted to build a life with me. But his career was taking off. Someone needed to handle the entertaining, the networking, the image management. He said we'd revisit my design work once he made partner. She stared at the city below. That was 7 years ago. Duyun said nothing, just listened in a way that felt like excavation, digging up everything she'd buried. I closed my studio, Christina continued. Sold my equipment. Became the perfect consultant's wife. Joined the right committees, wore the right clothes, smiled at the right people. And he still, her voice cracked. He still chose someone else. No. Duyun's voice cut sharp. He chose someone convenient. You were never the problem, Christina. You were just too big for his small life. She looked at him, then really looked. The tattoos that marked him as dangerous. The scars on his knuckles that told stories of violence. The eyes that held hers without flinching. What do you want from me? She whispered. Want? He set down his coffee. I want to see what happens when you stop performing. When you take up space instead of shrinking. When you create again. You don't know me. I know enough. He stood, moving to the terrace edge. I know you created a menu last night that made grown men cry because they tasted their grandmother's kitchen. I know you're terrified right now, but you came anyway. I know. That you're dangerous, Christina interrupted. The way people looked at you last night. The security. The tattoos. You're not some art collector, Duyun. You're a monster. His smile was cold. Yes. I built an empire on blood and fear and strategic cruelty. I've done things that would make you run screaming. He turned to face her fully. But I've never made anyone disappear. And I never will. The sun crested the horizon, painting them both in gold. Duyun's private gallery was in the sub-basement, accessible only by a fingerprint-locked elevator that descended into what felt like the Earth's core. Christina's pulse quickened as the doors opened to reveal a space that shouldn't exist beneath a Manhattan high-rise. Vaulted ceilings, museum-grade lighting, climate control humming like a sleeping beast. This isn't legal, she said, stepping into the vast room. Very little about me is. Duyun's hand pressed lightly against her lower back, guiding her forward. But everything here is real. The collection stole her breath. A Lee Bull cyborg sculpture that museums had been searching for. Park Seo-bo's Ecriture series paintings that had vanished from a Seoul auction. Yun Hyung-kun's Umber abstracts worth millions. How did you? Don't ask questions you don't want answered. He stopped in front of a textile piece mounted behind glass. Though this one I acquired legally. Almost. Christina's world tilted. It was hers. From her Invisible Women collection. The centerpiece, a silk tapestry embedded with thermochromic pigments that shifted from deep indigo to molten gold. She'd sold it to a private collector in Tokyo 7 years ago, needing money to help Brian with his business investment that had mysteriously evaporated. You bought this, she whispered. 3 years ago. Estate sale. The previous owner never displayed it properly, kept it in darkness like it was shameful. Duyun stood beside her, close enough that she felt his heat. I've been looking for the artist ever since. Imagine my surprise when she walked into my gala carrying champagne. Christina's hands trembled. You knew who I was before we collided. I knew the moment you entered the room. The way you moved, controlled, efficient, hiding. But then I saw you arranging the canapes, and you transformed. Your hands created compositions. You were making art from appetizers because you can't help it. It's who you are. She couldn't look away from her work. It pulsed with heat from the gallery lights, colors shifting like breathing. She'd forgotten how alive her pieces could be. Why keep it in a basement? This isn't storage, Christina. This is a sanctuary. Duyun gestured to the collection surrounding them. Everything here was dismissed, stolen, hidden, or erased by people who feared what it represented. I give them space to exist as they were meant to. He moved behind her, his voice dropping to something almost vulnerable. You stopped creating because someone convinced you that brilliance was inconvenient, that your art made you too much, too difficult, too visible. His reflection appeared in the glass beside hers. I spent 6 months tracking down every piece from your collection. Gallery sales, private auctions, estate liquidations. Do you know what I found? What? That Brian Hall purchased 3 pieces under an LLC, then resold them at double the price to fund his vacation property. Duyun's jaw tightened. He profited from destroying your dream. The air left Christina's lungs. I have the receipts, he continued quietly. The emails. Everything. She turned to face him, tears burning. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to know what you're worth. And what he cost you. Duyun's hand lifted, hovering near her face but not touching. And because when you're ready to create again, I want you to know that some of us collect beauty not to own it, but to set it free. They ended up back on the terrace as afternoon bled into evening, the city transforming into a galaxy of lights below them. Duyun had opened a bottle of soju, the expensive kind that tasted like silk and regret, and for the first time since they'd met, Christina saw cracks in his carefully maintained armor. My father ran protection rackets in Seoul, he said, staring at the skyline like it was a chessboard. Small time. Brutal. He believed respect came from fear, and fear came from broken bones. Christina sat across from him, knees pulled to her chest, listening. I was 12 when he brought me to my first collection. A restaurant owner who was late on payments. My father made me watch while his men destroyed everything the man had built. Then he handed me a bat. Duyun's jaw tightened. Said I needed to learn the family business. Did you? I broke the man's arm. Then I vomited in the alley for an hour. He poured more soju. But I learned. For 6 years I learned how to hurt people. How to make them afraid. How to turn violence into currency. The confession should have terrified her. Instead, Christina felt the weight of his truth. The cost of survival in a world that demanded monstrosity. What changed? My father got greedy, tried to expand into territories controlled by bigger organizations. They sent a message by burning down our house with my mother inside. His voice went flat, emotionless. I was 18. I had 2 choices, run or become something worse than the men who killed her. You chose worse. I chose evolution. Duyun finally looked at her. I took my father's street gang and turned it into a legitimate empire. Real estate, tech investments, cultural foundations. But I kept the teeth underneath. The network, the leverage, the willingness to do what others won't. He stood, moving to the terrace edge, gripping the railing with scarred knuckles. I've ordered beatings, orchestrated financial ruin, made people disappear, not killed, but erased from the board until they learned their place. His reflection in the glass looked haunted. I've built something powerful and terrible, And I sleep fine at night because everyone in my world chose to play this game. Christina rose, drawn to him like gravity. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know what you're walking into. He turned, and the vulnerability in his eyes shattered her. Because I've spent 15 years becoming untouchable, and then you looked at me across a gallery like I was human, and I. He stopped, jaw working. You what? I felt seen. The words came out raw. For the first time since my mother died, someone looked at me and didn't see the monster or the empire. Just me. Christina stepped closer, her heart thundering. I see you, Duyun. The boy who vomited in the alley. The man who collects stolen art to give it sanctuary. The monster who's never made anyone disappear. You should run from this. From me. I've been running my whole life. Running from my own voice, my own space, my own fire. She was close enough to touch him now. Maybe I'm done running. His hand lifted to her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. If you stay, there's no going back. Brian will come for you. My enemies will see you as leverage. The world I operate in doesn't forgive witnesses. Then don't make me a witness. Christina's voice steadied. Make me a partner. The kiss happened like an earthquake, slow at first, tectonic plates shifting, then catastrophic. His hands cradled her face like she was precious, breakable, sacred. Her fingers traced the ink on his neck, feeling his pulse race beneath dragon scales and Korean poetry. He tasted like soju and smoke and promises that would ruin her for anyone else. When they broke apart, the city sprawled beneath them. His empire, his kingdom, his battlefield. And she was no longer invisible. Welcome to the empire, Duyun whispered against her lips. Try not to burn it down. Christina smiled. No promises. Duyun's building had a 10th floor space he'd been using for storage. 40-foot ceilings, north-facing windows, enough square footage to house Christina's resurrection. Within 48 hours, he'd transformed it into a design studio that made her old workspace look like a closet. Industrial sewing machines. Bolts of fabric in every texture imaginable. A digital printing station. Dye vats. A mannequin army waiting for her vision. This is too much, Christina said, standing in the doorway at dawn, coffee forgotten in her hand. This is the minimum you deserve. Duyun adjusted his cufflinks, preparing for a meeting with city officials who didn't know they were already bought. Create whatever you want. I've got suppliers on standby. No budget. No restrictions. Why? He crossed to her, pressed a kiss to her temple that felt like a brand. Because watching you disappear was killing something in me I didn't know still existed. And I'm selfish enough to want to see what happens when you take up space again. Then he was gone, and Christina was alone with possibility for the first time in 7 years. She started with sketches. Frantic, messy, everything she'd locked away pouring onto paper. Garments that transformed. Textiles embedded with responsive technology. A collection about women who'd been erased and chose to become unforgettable. The days blurred. She'd work until her hands cramped, until fabric dust coated her natural hair she'd finally freed from Brian's preferred sleek bun. Duyun would appear around midnight, sometimes with takeout, sometimes with blood on his knuckles he'd wash off in her studio sink without explanation. Rough negotiation, she'd ask. Something like that. He'd watch her work with an intensity that should have made her self-conscious but instead felt like fuel. Sometimes his associates would arrive. Min-jun with his lieutenant's cold assessment, others whose names she didn't ask for. They'd conduct business in Korean while she draped fabric, their world of territorial disputes and political corruption running parallel to her rebirth. She learned to read the room without understanding the words. Tense shoulders meant violence was being discussed. Du-Yoon's flat tone meant someone had crossed a line. The sudden silence when she walked past meant they were protecting her from knowledge that could become liability. She didn't ask. He didn't explain. It worked. 3 weeks in, she'd completed 6 pieces. A jacket with thermochromic panels that shifted from black to crimson when touched, anger made visible. A dress embedded with fiber optics that pulsed with the wearer's heartbeat. Vulnerability as art. Pants with reactive fabric that displayed the wearer's location history. A map of everywhere they'd been erased. Invisible Women 2.0, she told Du-Yoon one night. Exhausted and paint-stained and more alive than she'd felt in a decade. He studied each piece like scripture. Touched the jacket and watched it bloom red under his scarred fingers. These will terrify people. Good. When do we show them? We. Du-Yoon pulled her against him, and she could feel his heartbeat through the expensive shirt, steady and certain. You think I'm letting you do this alone? I've got connections at every major gallery in 3 countries. Say the word, and you'll have an opening that makes your CFDA award look like a participation trophy. Christina should have argued. Should have wanted to do this independently. Prove herself without his empire backing her. But she was done shrinking. 6 months, she said. I need 6 months to finish the full collection. Done. He kissed her, deep and possessive. Now come to bed. You haven't slept in 30 hours. I need to finish this hem. The hem will wait. You won't collapse in my studio because you forgot humans need rest. She let him pull her away, looking back at her creations glowing in the industrial lighting. Her phone sat abandoned on the cutting table. 17 missed calls from Brian's lawyer she hadn't returned. Brian had served her papers, expecting a quiet settlement. Expected her to fade into whatever life divorced women were supposed to live. He had no idea she was building something that would eclipse everything he'd ever diminished. The Cancer Research Foundation gala wasn't on Christina's radar until Du-Yoon mentioned it casually over breakfast in her studio. Now furnished with a daybed she actually used. We're attending the Rothman Foundation event Saturday, he said, scrolling through his phone with one hand, the other tracing patterns on her lower back. You're my partner. It's time the world knew it. His eyes lifted, dark and certain. Unless you're not ready. Christina thought about Brian's Instagram, about 7 years of performing palatability, about the collection taking shape 10 floors above them that screamed her existence. I'm ready. She wore her own design, a midnight blue gown with panels that shifted to gold when light hit them, like a bruise healing in reverse. Her hair was a crown of natural curls Brian had spent years asking her to manage. No wedding ring. No apologies. Du-Yoon looked devastating in Tom Ford, his neck tattoo visible above his collar, a deliberate choice that made society matrons clutch their pearls. His hand stayed possessive on her waist as they entered the Plaza Ballroom. The whispers started immediately. Christina felt eyes tracking them like predators scenting wounded prey. Then she saw him. Brian stood near the bar with his VP girlfriend, both dressed in matching beige like they'd coordinated their blandness. His face went sheet white when he spotted Christina. Ignore him. Du-Yoon murmured against her ear. He's irrelevant. But Brian was already moving toward them, weaving through the crowd with the determination of a man who'd convinced himself he still had power. Christina. Her name came out strangled. What the hell are you doing here? Attending a charity gala. Same as you. Her voice stayed level, unbothered. Brian's eyes cut to Du-Yoon, and something like recognition flickered. I've seen your name. Park Du-Yoon. You're that real estate developer who... He stopped, jaw tightening. How did you even meet him? Does it matter? You're making a fool of yourself. Running around with... He lowered his voice. Do you know what people say about him? The allegations. The connections. I know exactly who he is. Christina smiled. Do you know who you are? A mediocre consultant who stole his wife's artwork to fund a vacation home, then moved his mistress into it. Brian's face went crimson. That's not, how did you? I told her. Du-Yoon's voice cut like a blade. Every receipt, every email, every piece of her collection you liquidated for profit while convincing her that her dreams were inconvenient. This is a private conversation. Nothing about you is private anymore, Brian. Du-Yoon pulled out his phone with surgical precision. You work for Whitmore Consulting, correct? Partner track. Brian's confidence cracked. What are you? Whitmore's CEO is Stephen Park. My cousin. Lovely man. Du-Yoon's smile was glacial. One call. He dialed. Put it on speaker. Du-Yoon. Stephen's voice came through warm, familiar. What can I do for you? Brian Hall. Senior consultant in your New York office. I need him gone. Silence. Then, consider it done. Effective Monday. Wait. Brian's voice pitched desperate. You can't just. Your apartment lease, Du-Yoon continued, scrolling through his phone. The building's owned by one of my subsidiaries. Interesting. And your girlfriend works for Manchester Capital, yes? Their primary investor is. He paused for effect. Also me. The color drained from Brian's face. I'm not a violent man, Brian. Not anymore. Du-Yoon pocketed his phone. I don't need to break bones when I can simply remove the ground beneath your feet. By Monday, you'll have no job, no apartment, and your girlfriend will discover her company's eliminating her position due to restructuring. You're insane. I'm thorough. Du-Yoon's hand tightened on Christina's waist. You had 7 years with an extraordinary woman and you chose to make her small. To profit from her erasure. To replace her like she was disposable. He leaned in close, voice dropping to something lethal. So now I'm making you disappear. Not from existence. I'm not that generous. Just from relevance. You'll spend the rest of your mediocre life knowing you had everything and threw it away for beige. Brian stood frozen, his girlfriend appearing beside him with confusion etched across her face. Christina felt like she should say something. Offer final words. Instead, she simply turned away, letting Du-Yoon guide her toward the dance floor. That was extreme, she whispered. That was restrained. His eyes blazed. I wanted to destroy him completely. But you don't need his destruction. You just needed him gone. The orchestra started a waltz. Du-Yoon pulled her close. And Christina danced in the ruins of her old life, wearing her own design, held by a monster who'd never once asked her to disappear. Christina left at dawn without telling him. She'd woken in Du-Yoon's bed, wrapped in 1,000 thread count sheets and the scent of sandalwood, and watched him sleep. Even unconscious, he looked dangerous. Jaw tight, one hand curled near his face where he could reach the gun she knew he kept in the nightstand. The gala had been 3 days ago. Since then, she'd watched him dismantle Brian's entire existence with the casual efficiency of someone pruning a garden. Job gone. Apartment lease terminated. The girlfriend had left Brian via text after her position was eliminated. Du-Yoon had done it all from his office, making calls in Korean while Christina worked in her studio, their worlds running parallel until they collided in his bed each night. She should have felt vindicated. Instead, she felt terrified. Not of him. Of how much power he wielded. Of how easily he could erase anyone who inconvenienced him. Of the men who came to his penthouse at odd hours, leaving with instructions that ended in blood she'd never see but knew existed. She left a note on his pillow. Need to think. Don't follow me. Then she drove. 4 hours north to a seaside town in Connecticut she'd visited once as a child. Off-season, the beach was empty. Just gray water and grayer sky and seagulls screaming into the wind. She rented a cottage that smelled like cedar and salt. No Wi-Fi. No cell service unless she walked to the cliff edge. Just space to breathe without the weight of empire pressing against her lungs. For 2 days, she didn't think. Just walked the beach, collected sea glass, made terrible coffee on a temperamental stove. Let the silence excavate everything she'd been avoiding. On the 3rd day, her phone buzzed. She'd climbed to the cliff for her daily check-in with the world. 17 missed calls from Duyun. No angry texts. No demands. Just one message. I'm here when you're ready. No pressure. No conditions. And one from Maya. Girl, turn on the news. Christina's hands shook as she pulled up the local news site. Consulting firm executive arrested in art fraud scheme. Brian's face stared back at her from the headline. The article detailed a years-long investigation into an LLC he'd used to purchase and resell artwork, including pieces from emerging designers and artists, at inflated prices to clients he'd pressured into buying. Money laundering. Fraud. Tax evasion. The evidence had been anonymously provided to prosecutors. Christina knew exactly who'd provided it. She sat on the cliff edge, legs dangling over nothing, and let herself feel it all. The fury at Brian's betrayal ran deeper than she'd known. The relief that Duyun had seen it and acted. The terror that he could do the same to her if she ever became inconvenient. Except he'd given her a studio with no strings, invested in her collection without demanding ownership, told her his darkest truths without expecting absolution, let her leave without following. Brian had loved her small, had profited from her silence, had replaced her the moment she became too expensive to maintain. Duyun saw her whole and wanted more, wanted her dangerous, wanted her visible, wanted her to take up so much space the world had no choice but to witness her. The cost was living in a world where violence solved problems, where power came from knowing which strings to pull, where love meant protection through destruction. But wasn't invisibility its own violence? Hadn't she been destroying herself for 7 years, one small concession at a time, until nothing remained? Her phone rang. Duyun. She answered. I'm not apologizing for Brian, he said immediately. He deserved worse. I know. Silence. Then, are you coming back? Christina watched the ocean assault the rocks below, relentless, powerful, refusing to apologize for its nature. I need to know something first, she said. If I asked you to stop, to walk away from the empire, the violence, all of it, would you? No. His honesty cut clean. This is who I am, Christina. I've built something that protects people I care about by making examples of people who threaten them. I won't pretend to be smaller to make you comfortable. Good. Her voice steadied. Because I'm done with men who perform. I'd rather have your honest monster than someone else's acceptable lie. She heard his exhale, sharp with relief. Does this mean? It means I choose you. I choose visibility, even when it's dangerous. I choose partnership with someone who sees me, even if the world he operates in terrifies me. She stood, turning away from the ocean. I choose us. When will you be home? Home. His penthouse. Her studio. Their collision. Tomorrow, Christina said. I have a collection to finish. I'll be waiting. She drove back at sunrise, and when she walked into Duyun's penthouse, he pulled her into his arms like she was oxygen. Don't leave like that again, he whispered against her hair. Then don't give me reasons to run. Deal. They stood there, monster and artist, empire and resurrection, choosing each other despite every reason not to. 6 months later, the Guggenheim's rotunda transformed into Christina's resurrection. Invisible Women, Resurgence spiraled up the museum's iconic curves, 12 pieces that refused to be ignored. The thermochromic jacket blazed crimson under gallery lights. The heartbeat dress pulsed with fiber optic veins. A cape embedded with GPS tracking displayed every place Christina had erased herself over 7 years, mapped in golden thread. 200 guests filled the space. Critics, collectors, fashion editors who'd written her obituary years ago. And Du-Yoon, watching from the shadows with Min-Jun and his security detail, letting her have this moment without his empire overshadowing it. Christina stood at the center in her final piece, a gown that shifted from invisible to incandescent, embedded with thousands of micro-LEDs that responded to sound. Every word spoken near her made her glow brighter. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Christina Williams has returned, Vogue whispered into their recorders. And she's brought fire. Then the crowd parted, and Brian walked in. He looked smaller somehow. Thinner. His suit was off the rack, his confidence shattered. The fraud charges had been dropped, insufficient evidence his lawyer had managed, but his reputation was ash. Christina. Her name came out desperate. We need to talk. The room went silent. Phones appeared, ready to document the spectacle. No, she said simply. We don't. You can't just erase 7 years. I didn't erase them. You did. Every time you sold my work for profit. Every time you convinced me my dreams were inconvenient. Every time you chose beige over brilliant. Her voice carried through the rotunda, amplified by acoustics and fury. I'm not invisible anymore, Brian. And you no longer get to speak to me. Min-Jun materialized beside Brian, eerily polite. Sir, you weren't on the guest list. Please come with me. This is ridiculous. I have every right. 2 more security guards appeared. Brian's bravado crumbled. He looked at Christina one final time, searching for the woman who'd made herself small for him. She stared back, glowing, incandescent, taking up space. They escorted him out. The crowd exhaled. Conversations resumed. Christina's hands shook with adrenaline until Du-Yoon appeared beside her, solid and certain. You handled that perfectly, he murmured. I wanted to destroy him. You did. By existing. He took her hand. But I have a question. Before she could respond, he dropped to one knee. The rotunda went silent again. Every phone pivoted. Du-Yoon pulled out a box. Not the delicate, demure thing Brian had offered 7 years ago. This was bold. Black lacquer with gold hinges. Inside sat a ring that looked like armor. Titanium band embedded with black diamonds that formed a crown. Christina Williams, he said, voice carrying to every corner of the museum. I'm not asking you to be my wife. I'm asking you to be my partner. My equal. My queen in an empire built on blood and beauty. He looked up at her, this dangerous man on his knees before 200 witnesses. I'm offering you visibility, protection, resources to create without limits, and a love that will never ask you to shrink. His jaw tightened. But I'm also offering you violence. Enemies. A world where people will target you to wound me. Where your safety requires constant vigilance. Where loving me means accepting what I am. Christina looked at the ring. At the man. At the collection spiraling above them. Her resurrection made tangible. Yes, she said. Du-Yoon stood, sliding the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Felt like a crown and a weapon. He kissed her in front of everyone. Critics, collectors, the world that had watched her disappear and was now witnessing her coronation. When they broke apart, Her gown blazed with light from the cheers echoing through the rotunda. Queens don't bow, Duyun whispered against her lips. No, Christina smiled. They conquer. Thank you for watching this video till the end. Glad you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to this channel for more amazing and intriguing story like this. Thank you.